Well, Jim, great to see you again, and we are back at it. A little bit different time than usual that we're doing this recording, but that shouldn't really make a difference for those watching and listening. And much like last episode with the President's Day podcast special episode, if you will, wanted to have another special episode from mine and our producer's recent experience at the local town hall that, as you mentioned, had made national news. And for those that may be listening or watching, there was the local 7th District of Georgia had a town hall meeting at the Roswell City Hall. This was last Thursday, a week from today, so that would have been February 20th. And it's, of course, a public forum at a public location, right? Or a public meeting at a public location. And so like we have the right to do in this country, we showed up, freedom of press, right? And brought, our nice camera, that one of them that we used to record this podcast, and hunkered down. And I wanted to, share this with Jim, but of course wanted to wait till we were here recording. That I kind of thought that we would meet some resistance, right, from showing up with this sort of equipment, right? If nothing else, from like the space that it takes up, and it's intimidating, right? Especially that camera. I mean, that's not just your everyday hobby, camera that you see a photographer with, And so I told Brian, let's leave the bulk of the equipment out in the car, and you bring in the camera bag. And Brian, name dropping you here, is our producer. We go into the town hall meeting, the Roswell City Hall. He has his camera bag. I have my backpack. And I say, and I have our power bank, a big power bank that you could plug in a couple household style outlets. Plugs into, and then USB, whatever. So, I mean, it's like I like to call it my electric lunchbox, because it's like a lunchbox size cooler, shaped power bank. And so, of course, we're already getting looks, even just with the camera bag. I'm walking in with a backpack. Were you the
only ones?
Well, so...
Were other media was there too, right?
Yeah, I great question. So, we get there. We don't see any other, media vans, of course. The place is already packed. Roswell City Hall, and there's a lot of parking out there, and a big parking lot, and broken up into multiple different areas. Everywhere was essentially full. We were lucky to find a spot, and we intended to show up at 5:30, an hour before the event started at 6:30. Doors opened at 5:30, right? So I wanted to make sure we could be there, get in a nice spot so we could set up our camera, right? And if nothing else, I don't know what the format exactly was going to be. Of course, I wanted to ask a question, as I had mentioned on really a couple of our last podcasts, if not all of our last podcasts, the letter I sent to Dr. Rich McCormick, the Congressman of the 7th District here in Georgia. And so we show up, don't see any media, and we get into our little corner. And I was actually calling Brian up, who was still on the main floor of Roswell City Hall. And you have to register on your phone that you're attending. You have to register if you want to submit a question to be asked, because as you'll see in the format, in the video, the format of asking questions was you submit a question via a Google form on your phone by scanning a QR code outside of where the meeting was being held, and then they would randomly call someone that submitted a question. If you were there in the meeting room, then you would actually be given the mic, and you could free ball essentially, right? And just go totally off topic from what your question actually was.
And people did do that, I believe.
I think so, to some degree. It was hard to say because they didn't actually read out the question for the person unless they were in the overflow room, or they had maybe already left, but they still wanted to address that question. But this is again still getting ahead of when we show up. We want to go and secure a spot to film. I get up there and find a nice spot. Brian's still doing the sign up registration. I'm overhearing people saying that, hey, the room's already filling up, right? And again, this is like 45 minutes before the event's even starting. So space is already becoming very limited. It was standing only space already, 15 minutes after the doors had opened. And so I called Brian to get up there so he could get his spot. And I told him, I'm going to go get the rest of the equipment out of the car while you're setting up the camera with like what we have here. I need to go get the tripod, our audio recorder, the monopod stand for the audio recorder. And I get back up to like the second level where the meeting is being held. And I hear that they're cutting it off, right? There's too many people, or there's already enough people in the meeting room. Everyone else from now on out has to go to the overflow room. And so there's like 3 people ahead of me at this point. They all got turned away.
Were you in the overflow, or were you actually in the main?
So we were in the main room, both, and then I ran out to go get equipment, right? And so I get back up there, and there's 3 people ahead of me. They're sent to the overflow room, including one lady who was in the room like I was previously, but she left to go to the bathroom or something like that. Her husband was still in there, or someone like, a family member. And she was still sent to the overflow room. But here I am with like a tripod and everything. Before I could even say anything, I get asked, oh, you work here? And of course, I'm not going to say no, right? And get sent to the overflow room. So, and I mean, technically, we're working there. I mean, free work. It's, independent work that we're doing, recording the podcast. But I mean, I did say yes, right? And, just continued on through the door. And so, I mean, maybe not the most truthful representation there, but again, I wasn't going to say no and get sent away to the overflow room. So we ended up, setting up the tripod. We had already started talking with a cop that was there, as security, as our producer pointed out. And, of course, I had longer hair, and we're not the most like polished people, right? Even from a looks perspective, right? And so, especially showing up with that gear, we both have big bags, and no one else is showing up with like a backpack and a camera bag, like we are. So they probably had an officer come stand by, where we were recording, but we start talking about what we're doing. They take interest, start talking about the work that we do in drones outside of media as well. Then all of a sudden, someone from Congressman Rich McCormick's team comes up. She's like an intern on like the media communications team, and she asked like who we were with. We told her that, yeah, we do have a media company, but we're really just here, members of the free press, right? And so she ends up giving us our card, and then gives us press badges in case anyone makes a stink about, us being there. And then, not even a couple minutes later, here comes, slightly older lady, communications director of Rich McCormick's team. And she basically starts listing reasons why we can't film there, where legally we have every right to be there, right? And she was like, well, we didn't get like waivers from the audience members. They're in public space, if they don't want to be on video, they shouldn't be here, right? I mean, again, because even if we're not going to film it, to your point, wouldn't there be other media there filming it? Well, apparently, and this could have just been an excuse to not allow us to film it, and they were going to film it anyway. But she said that the city of Roswell already asked to film it, that they turned the city of Roswell down to film it. The national press, like the Washington Post and other like big news agencies you would be familiar with, wanting to cover the town hall, got turned down, and they basically established, we met with all the press beforehand, and we're only going to do photos and articles, maybe audio recording, and you could, and it's like, well, then what's the deal? Like, because we could take out our smartphones, as many people are undoubtedly going to do throughout this meeting. And what's the difference between us having a slightly better, video version, right? And she was like, well, if you could just take photos. I did, kind of give a smart aleck answer that, yeah, no worries, we'll just take a lot of photos and then sync it up with audio after the fact, right? Because that's essentially what video recording is, right? It's just taking 30 photos per second or 60 photos per second. And she got what I was getting at, because I wasn't trying to lie to her,
Right.
And she did appreciate that. So I guess kind of long story short, after this back and forth interaction for 10, 15 minutes, while I'm still trying to get my questions submitted to ask, while I'm trying to stand our ground just so we could be there and film this whole meeting, she did get the sense that, we weren't trying to make Rich McCormick looking bad. Meanwhile, like, it may be construed that I'm shit talking him for, maybe not the best way of putting it, but I'm just being open and honest about what happened, my experiences about it. Of course, I did get a talk to Dr. McCormick a very little bit, after talking with members of his team, staying our ground as he was getting up to go do the intro we're about to check out here. And I just told him I had written the letter that I had sent him, that I would like to talk to him more about drone reform and or reforming the FAA, specifically around drone ownership and usage. And he was like, oh, yeah, I would love to talk more about that. Kind of the typical canned response, like, hey, dude, great.
And did he also invite you to the town hall in that response back to you?
So I got a canned response, and then I think they just added me to his newsletter,
okay.
And then that's how I got notified of this town hall. But I got, again, the business card of the intern as well as the communications director. And I told her, look, we're still going to record this. I'm being upfront and honest about that. She was like, well, how can I trust you? I was like, luckily, we do live in a country that you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And of course, a lot of people, when it's not convenient to them, don't want to treat it like it's that way. But she understood, and we had the cliche, I understand you're trying to do your job, and I'm trying to do my job, and not even again for a business, just my job as a citizen. I feel like it's well within my right to be able to show up to this town hall meeting and record it in its entirety if I would like to, right? We're not trying to make out clips, and I will even refrain from publishing this and submit it to you for approval after the fact as a sign of good faith. Well, how can I trust you? And that's when I gave her the line, innocent until proven guilty, right? And so she did reach out the day after and said, hey, appreciate you, looking forward to learning more about your drone stuff and seeing how I could help. And I did follow up with an email after, some back and forth communication via text. And yeah, we were, of course, able to record the whole town hall recording.
So you guys got in. By
the skin of our teeth, at least me getting back in. The skin of my teeth.
So the major media companies were not able to get in. You guys were able to get in. You filmed the whole thing, right? So
in about 15, 20 minutes in to this, then we see 11 Alive. They show up, on the other end, and they have, a much, much bigger, broadcast camera setup than what we have even, right? But it's like, hey, who are these guys over there? They're able to record, but I thought we established we're not going to be, doing video. And so the city of Roswell ended up recording it in its entirety. That is up on YouTube, but they censored the audio. So a lot of the booing and the clapping and all the context around the clips that you see online is cut out from their full version. 11 Alive didn't, of course, post their full version. So we have the only uncensored version of this town hall meeting up online.
Wow.
And so that's why I wanted to do this episode and review it, because I do think, obviously, there was a couple of answers that, again, we'll address that I think he could have given better, but it was a very bad faith effort by most people in the audience to try to have a conversation with him. And again, it's really very hard to have a true conversation in a town hall format like this, but it was, and as we'll see, trying to get yes or no sort of answers out of non-yes or no questions. And we'll even hear me butt into another guy, off camera about this sort of nuance that you can't address in a yes or no sort of one answer reply. But in any case, great evening, very eventful evening, I should say, and just want to share it with you and others. So unless you have any other comments, we'll go ahead and play the first little intro bit here.
He's a veteran. He's a pilot. He's an emergency room doctor. And believe it or not, a former contestant on American Gladiators. And on most days, if you're in Washington, D.C., you'll even find Rich skateboarding to the office. We appreciate Congressman McCormick at a deep level.
Really quick, just from like a humanizing him point, I thought that was great. And, you know, of course, you're going to make comments like that specifically to, you know, appeal to, hey, he's a skateboarder. Well, I skateboard. That's pretty cool. I can relate to him from that perspective. But I really do think if we could get Dr. McCormick here, which I did include in my email beyond just addressing the reform I want to bring about to the FAA and drone ownership, drone usage, if we could address that on camera, right, as a part of a conversation like you and I are having here, and literally him being like a third wheel to this conversation, I think that's probably a large reason why I haven't heard back yet, because there's a lot of calculation involved. Well, do we really want to get his answer to, you know, this sort of question about drone reform that, you know, of course, drones are a hot topic in the media, right? There's a lot of pushback about privacy and, you know, all sorts of other regulations. Georgia right now is going through some statewide legislation to ban drone usage in a certain context for like local law enforcement agencies and really state agencies from not being able to use Chinese drones. And there's some pushback against that. I really, of course, being an owner of an American drone company, don't care about that as much as I really care about how can people as individuals own and use drones. And I don't think there's really anyone in the way that I'm talking out about it, you know, trying to push that ball forward. So in any case, between the skateboarding, he also makes a comment about looking up to Theodore Roosevelt in a way that, again, I've shared with you a lot. So I think we would see eye to eye on a lot. And not that it's all about seeing eye to eye, but even addressing a lot of these questions that he's asked from the people in the audience. And again, not necessarily a good faith sort of way, that we can address, you know, the actual nuances that these questions need, you know, without trying to get him in a gotcha sort of moment.
He's a tireless advocate for the people of Roswell, and we're honored to have him here with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Rich McCormick.
I want to first thank the mayor for being such a gracious host, and as well as the city of Roswell. Happy to be with you guys here today. I will tell you this, I want to be accessible. I want you guys to express your opinions, but realize that in this room there's probably about as many opinions as there are people. Realize that in any organization, it doesn't matter if you're in politics or a family or a church, you're not going to find two people that agree on everything. As a matter of fact, if everybody in your church agrees with everything the minister says, you might be in a cult. We're not in a cult.
And that right there was the first sense I think Brian and I got, that, all right, this is probably not going to be a good faith, you know, sort of town hall discussion where people really want to get, and there are some exceptions as we'll see, but I went through and like kind of timestamped this video, like breaking it up into chapters by like the questions people are asking. And out of the first 10 questions, 4 of them are about DOGE. So
sure.
Because that's not what I'm about. I want to respectfully disagree. I disagree with several people in my party, and that's okay. You're going to find that that's the American way. Our Constitution was designed to protect the individual rights of the ultimate minority, which is the individual. So when we approach this, realize our government is designed on purpose to not be so effective that we can change dramatically. And this is one thing I will differ, some of us. But I think we're supposed to change very slowly. We're supposed to have great balance of power. This is my beliefs. This is my beliefs. I'm not talking about anybody else's beliefs. I'm talking about my beliefs. Okay? In the Constitution, I believe. But it's supposed to be an ineffective government, so we'll never become more powerful than the people themselves. That's my belief. So, when we talk about this, that's my premise I come from. And I understand that not everybody agrees with the way that I think, and I probably don't agree with the way you think many times, but it will be a discussion. and hopefully it'll be respectful, because when I come at this, I'm not trying to convince you that you're wrong. I'm trying to convince you that I care. And if you call any of our office, doesn't matter, we never ask if you're a Democrat or Republican. We don't ask what your gender is or what your race is. We don't care what city you came from. We ask, how can we help? That's what we have. And we have one of the top constituent services in America. And we'll help you with anything. By the way, if you have a passport you need,
We'll help you with anything as long as it's not drone reform and going after the FAA. I'm kidding.
you have a problem with the IRS, the VA, anything that the federal government oversees, we'll do our darndest to get you that help. So know that first. That's beyond all politics. It doesn't have anything to do with partisan, okay? So if you need your help, call us. You can heckle me tonight and call me wrong, we're still gonna help you, okay? So know that's where we're coming from when we talk about our services to you. I want my staff, if you're in the room, raise your hand. Al Chaw is my deputy chief and my district director. He's got it here.
So you get the point. He's coming at it, or trying to come at it from, I think, a good
public servant.
Right.
He's covering his bases like they all do. I can tell it's getting ready to, the fuse has been lit and it's burning. It's getting ready to explode.
That's a great way of putting it.
Wants to ask a question, get to submit a question. Okay, so when you hear your
To
name,
clarify there, he was just making sure everyone that wanted to submit a question was able to submit a question. And again, the format was there's a QR code you could scan outside the room, fill out a Google form, and there was a series of topics that they had, like you could select from bullet points or, of course, select other and then write out your question out underneath
So
that.
if I could just kind of jump ahead, does
Yeah.
this, the plan that they have, does it disintegrate and turn into shouting contests and shouting? I mean, that's my understanding of what happened. So there were lots of questions that were asked that did not get answered, really, because the mob took over. Is that fair?
I think he addressed every question that was asked, but yeah, there was definitely moments where it got very unruly.
Okay. I've only seen
yeah.
snippets. I haven't seen the whole thing
Yeah.
until now.
Shocker. Unless you're one of the 151 other people, not a lot of people have seen this in its entirety. And that's why I think it was so important that we went out there and did this, because I had a sense of even going into it, because I've been to another similar town hall meeting for a congressman previously, when it was before the congressional districts got redrawn, and I forgot what district we were a part of then, but in any case, I remember that getting unruly at parts, and so I figured that this would be a good meeting, but in some cases it was really sad to see how bad it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it's entertaining, but again, that's not what we really want out of, I think, meetings like this. It's not, no one should be going this like, hey, this is going to be a show, right? We're going to get entertainment out of it.
I'll call your name first and last, the city, where you're from, and the topic of conversation. When you hear that, please step forward and ask your question of Congressman. We'll start with Mr. Doug King from Roswell. You have a question on DOGE and Elon Musk with Congressman. Doug,
we go.
the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you better. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here this evening and the opportunity to speak and ask questions. My question really just comes down to, do you believe that Mr. Musk is doing the appropriate work in the appropriate method apparently asked by the president, and if so, why?
So this is the most commonly asked question. We've kind of reviewed all the questions. This is the number one question, so we want to address it right away, because some of you really wanted to have this with us. Let me explain how the history of the review process in government works, just historically. Whether you go all the way back to Carter, Reagan, Clinton, Obama, Bush, they all had review processes. Sometimes it was called the Grace Commission, sometimes it was called Digital Services. They always had access in order to review where the money goes to go. President Trump renamed it the DOGE, but they have the same information access as the Digital Services. I'm going to explain something. So for about 1 hour, one person had more access than they're supposed to. He didn't use it. He didn't even know he had it. And then they closed the loop. Okay, are you guys familiar with digital services? I'm being serious. Digital services, which tracks money.
How many of those yeses do you think are actually genuine versus they don't want to look like the idiot for not knowing what digital services was? Because I didn't.
Right?
At least
now,
not by
we know
name.
for a fact that, first of all, for those people who say, well, he's not elected. You're right, he's not elected. No bureaucrat is elected. Not one person in the government bureaucracy is elected. Nor is any appointee. They're not elected. So we can set that aside. They're government employees.
He's being paid by the government.
I would like to be able to finish, if you don't mind, then you can make your comments. There are government employees that have access to information in order to track where the money is going. There's a lot of people upset about this because they think, oh, these people have access to my personal information. Guess what? The IRS has tons of information on your personal information. It's going to go really slowly if you don't let me finish. You gotta let me finish. You gotta let me finish. When you have any classified information, whether it be in the military or anything like, there's a need-to-know basis for each category of information you have access to, based on what bureaucratic agency you belong to, what you're assigned to by design of the government. Now, when you have access to information, and I've researched this, and you can say you have contrary information, and we can continue to look at this, and I continue to give you documentation that shows exactly what they have access to. I'm happy to do that with my staff, happy to issue that publicly. I'm not trying to hide anything. No problem. I'll do it.
Publish it.
The access they have of the information, and I've researched this as well, and basically I get to go in places where I have to go into a skip in order to get access to certain information, right? That's secret information. And even if I have access to information, that doesn't give information outside that purview. And so it's very specific to my qualifications for the job I'm trying to do. Same thing goes for digital services. Same thing is supposed to go for DOGE. Now you can say that's not the case, but I will show you the information that we've got to give you guys on. And that's why you have lawyers, and that's why you have Supreme Court, and that's why you have oversight of powers of government. When it comes to assignments, they are government contracted. They have a government assignment. They are hired in the government, even if they're not paid. The government employee by contract. They are. That's just the simple truth. And I can show you the paperwork on that too. We'll post it. That's fine. You can disagree with me all you want, but I'm just telling you the way it is. And I get that you don't agree with me and you think I'm not going to say it. But that's, unless they're lying to me.
And this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause, right?
You know what I do, so that's fine. I know what you're here tonight. So the point being that my understanding of DOGE is very similar to digital services, and they are tracking a lot of money that has gone to a lot of places it should have gone. Waste, fraud, and abuse.
And like all of those yell-outs are all censored from like Roswell's full recording, and it makes him look like super impatient, and and obviously he's getting a little bit flustered.
So
right?
you would not be in approval that they censored that. I don't like the fact that they censored out all that the crowd, the mob mentality, which is part of democracy. I mean, it's part of our system. So they should not have done that.
And if you don't want to look like that or be represented like that on camera, don't act like that, right?
That money where it's gone. The American people have agreed on certain things that we don't want the money to go to. Now, some is through grant processes, some through USAID, some things are going to be more controversial than others, some things are going to seem partisan. But by and large, the president has great purview over where a lot of this money goes. Now, I'll pause whenever you want. You can go and yell all you want, but I can't understand 10 people, let alone 100 people at once.
Not the president. If you are doing us a disservice to set that down and not stand up for us.
You go, sister.
You realize that a lot of this stuff will be litigated. Right? So, it's going to be litigated for. You don't think I'm going to stand up for you? So if we're gonna have a town hall, and I'm gonna come and stand in front of you and take your questions and try to answer them as honestly as I can. Then
So just a quick call here. One of the two comments that we got, I'm going to answer your questions as honestly as I can, is a huge GTFO red flag. And again, maybe not the best wording, but it, to the point, and we'll see this later on in the video, honestly as you can, when someone's misrepresenting what's really happening in a question and then trying to double down and get you to answer in a yes or no sort of format, if you're not answering in a yes or no, that's going to seem as dishonest, right? But it's, you know, there's a lot of nuance, right?
I think his intention, I feel, is genuine and it's good.
Right.
But he's not surviving in front of this crowd.
No,
and, it's to stand before a crowd like this. He's doing a very good job
to show up, right?
I feel to stand. He's doing a better job than I would do, and most people I know. But you have, if I think about someone like Vivek Ramaswamy, for example,
he would have never let the crowd get that sort of
incredibly articulate
control.
person, and we're seeing more and more of these types of people stepping into the political spectrum. It's going to take that level of communication skill to go forth here.
Yep.
I'm not saying I'm not saying he's wrong, and I mean the people in the audience, they have a different political viewpoint maybe than I do or that he does. But this is America, and this is the way it is.
Right.
So whoever stands before these crowds like this, and I've said this to you before in some of the earlier podcasts, that I personally believe that we're seeing a new generation of leaders coming in to the quote-unquote Republican Party, for example.
Yep.
And this guy,
he's new.
He's new.
Yep, as of 2022.
Yeah. Okay.
So he just got elected into his second term.
Well, the learning curve is very steep for him.
Yeah.
And God bless him.
But there was a non-vocal and at parts vocal supporting group there as well. But of course, it's very easy to not see that's the case when you're only hearing the really loud, crying out and yelling.
And let's face it too, man. It is so easy to be in the mob. When you're in the crowd, it's so easy. What he's doing is the hard part, standing, before that a group like that.
So you would have met this guy when we did that original drone flight test in our front yard.
Yeah. Dale
Sizemore, shout out to our good friend Dale, who we should probably bring on the podcast if he would be interested. He used to be the head of Tech Alpharetta, a local startup incubator around here. That's where iView was based out of for quite some time. I ended up seeing him there in the audience, and I ended up sending him a text, howdy stranger, and Jacob Andrews, just in case he didn't have my number saved if you got a new phone or whatever. Look at the cameraman to your front right. And then he responded sometime later while we were there. And of course I have a smartwatch, so I get a notification. I see you. Sorry you had to experience these nitwits. Ask a drone question. Maybe that will change the tenor of the crowd. And I maybe shouldn't have read his text, without asking. But I don't think he'll mind, because what I was doing, trying to get across by doing that, is there were a lot of Dales out there in the crowd, but they're going to be respectful, right? And they're not going to call out if they don't agree with him in the way that these people are yelling.
Or they're not going to have the courage to speak out or stand up against the mob like that.
But there's a way to stand up and speak out versus just being a yelling Karen, as like the Gen Z.
Did you hear people applaud and give him support?
And we'll hear that. And,
okay.
Yeah, and you'll hear me speak out at some points against the crowd.
Why does that not surprise me?
Then let's do that, okay? Yeah. But if you're going to just yell at me, that's not going to be an effective time. Okay, you know what? I get angry sometimes too, and I get angry with my peers, and I get angry with some people that say bad things to me too. But we want to be effective. We want to be effective and controlled, because if everybody's yelling, it's not going to be effective.
Congressman, you talk to us like actual people. Not another human.
See, it's totally.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah, that's totally uncalled for, and let's stick to the issues.
Right.
Is how I feel it. And again, it's so easy to be like that when you're in the mob.
Right.
When you're in the crowd.
You're just another random out there, right?
Mob mentality. There is a lot of thought I know from reading in investment newsletters. There's a great book written a long time ago in the 1700s. It's called Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And it talks about these various things throughout history that have happened. And the very first story that they talk about was in the 1700s. There was a tulip craze in Holland.
Yep.
When tulips were viewed as valuable for whatever reason, it caught the imagination. And
they were rare until they weren't.
Rare, and people were paying these extraordinary amounts. I may have already talked about this in one of the earlier podcasts.
You did briefly. I am also loosely familiar with it as well. Yeah.
And anyway, there's one aspect of the story was, there's a shopkeeper that has all this artwork and has all these things for sale, and someone brings in the tulips, and looking forward to getting this money, and some attention's taken away, and he comes in with his soup. Thinks it's an onion, he cuts it up and puts it in his soup and eats it, Didn't realize it was the tulips. So my main point I guess I'm making is when you're in a crowd like that, it's easy to be in the crowd. Right. What's hard to do is to stand firm against, against that tidal wave.
Yeah, and really represent your own ideas.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean, I feel, both sides do this where they gang up,
Right.
But I just...
And that's one of the questions I submitted, in like a fury in like the last, hour of this, because I wanted to be able to ask him genuine questions, even if it's like, hey, maybe this is not the best format to get a drone question asked, right? Because most other people, at least as of now, probably wouldn't care, at least in that crowd. But I was asking other questions, relevant, like my voting question, right? Would you be in support of making it so you only have to write in candidates, right? And I worded it better than that in submitting the question, but
these people are here to beat him up over DOGE.
Right.
That's why they're there, in my opinion. The majority of these folks that are there. And
that certainly was a lot of my impression leaving. And we did have a conversation with a lady on the outside of
don't do it.
On the outside of Roswell City Hall.
You can talk about it, don't do it.
Oh, doing like the salute.
Andy does it.
And yeah, because again, she had this sign of like Elon Musk and Donald Trump both doing the salute, right? That's all being the Nazi salute that people are proclaiming it to be. And I rolled down the window and just trying to have a genuine conversation and not yell at her like she's a bigot, right? Do you think, just like asking her this, do you think that Elon Musk and Donald Trump holding their hands up like this makes them a Nazi? Or do you think the Nazis killing millions of Jewish people, was what made people Nazis, right? And I forgot exactly how the conversation went, but we did have, again, we were in the car, rolled down the window. She was at the street corner with that sign, and she and I both saw eye to eye, and she said, thank you for having the conversation, right? Because I mentioned that's not the way that I think many other people see it. I think that's a misconstrued version of what's really happening. And it's that age old, trying to divide us, right? And I was just trying to help her see that, hey, I think you might be getting caught into this messaging that's trying to get you to not like other people that, support these people when they don't. The people that are supporting Elon Musk and Donald Trump by and large aren't trying to support authoritarian kings, Nazi, dictators in the way that you're hearing that they are, right?
There's a whole bunch of Nazis in this country if that's the case.
Right. Yeah. And that's where it gets
something million. Come on. It's a narrative that's being used by the enemies of Trump and Musk.
Well, and again,
it's being used to taint image or paint
Absolutely.
a certain imagery, I guess.
And it happens, on both sides, Republican and Democratic, right? And the pre-election, Jonathan, my cousin, we were having this conversation where I was thinking Donald Trump would win, and because there's a couple other people that know for sure voting for Kamala Harris, and no one was seeing it. And I thought, because his argument was that there's just so many people that, buy into this sort of messaging that there's no way that Donald Trump is going to be able to win again. But my argument was there's just as many people buying in for that sort of messaging that are falling for, like, Kamala Harris is literally a communist, and again, there might be more, sort of truth and those sort of ideologies being portrayed to her being characterized as communist or Marxist or whatever. But again, it just goes to show it happens both ways. These
Absolutely.
Character
Absolutely.
attacks.
This all just a thought, and I am.
Hey, let's pause really quick.
Okay.
I think we're having a technical glitch. Did you already pause or no?
Nope.
You're just going to edit?
Yep.
I mean, I can hear him the whole time, but that explains why he sounded so different.
Okay.
I'm talking in the wrong side.
All right.
Good.
Well, we're back. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick comment, and I'm observing, taking all this in because I did not attend the town hall, and I know you've reached out to the the representative. What this really is saying to me, and this is the challenge that's I think is coming ahead, or one of the biggest challenges. And Trump has said that he will address this, but this is way down. This is way down the list of all the other things that he's talking about. First, the economy, ending this Ukraine situation, getting the war against Israel calmed down,
The
bring peace.
multi-millions of people illegally here.
The
that we're
border situation,
pocketing.
absolutely. But I think the ultimate test for the next great leader of our country is going to be uniting this country and bringing us together. This is not the first time we've seen this, of course. I mean,
Much worse, Abraham Lincoln, as we mentioned in our last episode, that you did a really good job talking about.
Yeah, and you've seen, some of these town halls where you have people on the right that are screaming at the left representatives or people, Democrats, for example. So I'm just saying this is one of the things as I sit back and observe and look at all this. This is one of the things this really hits home because this happened so close and you guys were there. So this is a huge challenge. I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know, but uniting this country is really going to be, and this is one thing that Donald Trump, to me, has always really been kind of lacking in that he can't unite. He's not someone who can unite easily. If you want to be united with him, you're going to have to go his way, and there are people that are just not going to do that. So I don't know if Donald Trump's going to be the guy to do it. I'm not saying that I don't agree with his policies, because overall I do. This is one of the things I think that the next great president, and the next Abe Lincoln, or the next
JFK,
the next Teddy Roosevelt, it's going to have to be a uniter. It's going to be really hard.
And to that end, I think, you need to give Americans something to really look forward to on a long-term basis, right? Of course, there's hey, we're going to have America be the best place to raise your family, right? But, unfortunately, especially nowadays, with like gender politics, right? Of course, now there's politics around gender as well, right? That, not a lot of people want to have, a more traditional life of, building humanity, right? Bring new life into this world. And not that that's, what it's all about, so to speak. But I think there is something to be said that there's no stake in the ground for a lot of people. There's no hey, this is what I'm looking forward to, as an American, that we can accomplish together, as a country, as the American people. And I think, JFK, unfortunately did not see it in his lifetime, set a decade plus long mission to get to the moon. And of course, there's their own conspiracies around all of that, right? But I think that's like those sort of big public work projects. Teddy Roosevelt with the Panama Canal, that's something that is brought up. All right. But now all of the big, public work initiatives are all just war or war-related activities, right?
I will say this to tie in with what you're talking about, and Trump has said that these next 4 years are going to be the new golden era for this country.
Drill, baby, drill.
And I have bought in. I've told friends of mine, people, acquaintances, that a lot of people I disagree with, and they disagree with me. But that's why I supported Donald Trump, and I'm hopeful. At the end of the day, we have to rely on faith, and we have to rely on our core beliefs and the gut that we have based on our upbringing and et cetera. And I firmly am hopeful that within 4 years since he's taken control as president, that this country moves into a new golden era. And if we do, I think that that's probably going to be one of the best ways to unite people. Again, it won't be by necessarily
through success, right?
Unite through success. And again, with Trump, if you're going to unite, you're going to have to do it his way, meaning that it's going to have to be based on the economy coming around. And, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and I was saying, in 4 years, I feel that, and one of the reasons I supported Trump is I feel that there will be less wars, there'll be more people working, less people unemployed, less crime in our cities, a more safe and secure America. I believe that. That's why I voted the way I did. And I think 70 plus million Americans felt the same way. And we're putting our confidence into this guy, watching what he's doing. He is like an Andrew Jackson, a rebel type of president. And I feel people are concerned that he's not following protocol and that he's being accused of not following the Constitution. Very valid concerns. This is America, and this is what this country's based on. I guess I'm rambling, but what I'm trying to say is I feel if he does usher in a new golden era for America, that will be a great way to see this country at least unite more than it is now.
And he's talked about that in numerous long-form discussions, press conferences, interviews. I mean, again, whether or not it happens or not, I like to think we're on a good track. And again, people have vastly different opinions of what's actually happening and how it's happening, like with DOGE, as we'll see here. But I think we just got through question number 1 around DOGE, and question number 2 is coming up here.
Bad things to me too. But we want to be effective.
I have a question on foreign policy for Congressman.
Thank you. And I threw this one to you as a softball because I figured Elon.
It's actually Claudia, not Claudio.
And he's going to continue to be the main topic tonight because we are all freaking pissed off about this.
So easy to be like that. So easy.
So, Jim, you might have heard, no, we're not. No, we're not. Don't speak for everyone, lady. That was, of course, yours truly speaking up. I do not like that. And, of course, I, like probably many people, are doing it, right, where they'll speak on behalf of other people, right? And I know that's a lot of what we're told we should want out of leaders, right? They should represent us and our ideas, right? But you can't have one person representing the ideas of 100 different people when their ideas are going to all be conflicting, right? And then you're going to get on, well, that person then just flip-flops, every time they get a new idea that they're asked to represent by a different person. So what, again, it really comes down to is you got to just have enough faith in this person and their ideas, right? And if you don't like any of them enough, again, run for office or find someone
or vote that person out.
Yeah. Your experience as a service member, thank you for your service. According to your bio, your deployment to various areas of conflict, I would like to know your opinion and your stance on the current situation created by the president, wherein he is now saying that Ukraine is responsible for the war that Russia has initiated. I would like to know if you as a congressman will get that with your fellow congresspeople and stand up to the lies that are being told to the Americans. And I would also like to know if you believe that the 80-year-old alliance that we have with our European allies is strong enough to withstand the attack from our White House, because this is a dangerous, dangerous precedent. You have to so
So you're right, I spent over 20 years in the military. I spent a couple deployments in the Persian Gulf, a couple tours in Africa, a couple tours in Korea, a tour in Afghanistan as head of emergency medicine. I happen to be a NATO parliamentarian. I've actually voted on NATO. I've had legislation passed NATO. I stand firmly with NATO. I believe that I believe what Reagan said 40 years ago at Point to Hawk, what she said, isolationism never was and never will be the answer to a tyrannical expansionist government.
Well, he's getting some positive reinforcement there.
And that's where I don't necessarily agree with him totally.
Right.
I think we should be more isolationist than what we are. I think we shouldn't be, the world police of the world, right, as much as we are. Again, we talked about that even in the context of World War II, that there are some questionable actions from our own government or within our own government to get us into the war in the first place, where otherwise what was our business really, other than really bailing out Britain that was at severe risk of capitulating. I mean, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, man, the Ukraine situation, it is a complex situation.
Absolutely.
And the media and we're trying to boil it down to a very simple thing. And that's I don't know enough to speak historically. I mean, when the former president's son is sitting on an energy board of Burisma in Ukraine,
making millions of dollars,
being paid all this money, and he has no understanding of energy and has no real business being on that board.
He's very familiar with energy.
It just, the whole thing stinks. And this is part of the doubt that's crept into the minds of the American people, which says that maybe Ukraine is not as, squeaky clean as maybe we've thought of in the past.
No, and again,
they're definitely not.
A lot of like these world government sort of agencies and organizations that get together across all these democratic countries, European countries, that they'll put together these studies like that, even like who's best in education, who's best in happiness, all these sort of metrics, and then corruption. And Ukraine constantly or consistently rates at the bottom or near the bottom for the most corrupt European country, right? And it's
Zelensky has postponed elections or prevented elections, free elections. And so he's not squeaky clean,
right? So
Vladimir Putin is definitely not squeaky clean.
So people bring up like, well, Vladimir Putin's no president; he's a dictator. What do you call Zelensky then, right? If he was not elected, right? If he suspended elections.
Yeah.
I've actually sat with President Zelensky in person. I sat with her, and I'm very realistic because when you go to command and staff school and you learn the history of warfare, and you understand why we've had problems in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, when you have a protracted war, you lose hot risk war. And I was trying to avoid this, and this is why I've really been frustrated. Because I think
can you pause it?
Yeah.
Just one other quick comment, and this is something I think that Trump's viewpoint is. He wants to stop the bloodshed.
Yep.
What is the total death toll right now? Russia's lost what, 600,000 people?
So again,
something like that.
Propaganda, information warfare at play here, but I've heard, Russia about 700, 800, 900,000, somewhere 700,000 to 900,000, let's say.
We lost, 65,000 in Vietnam? We lost about 65,000 servicemen in the Vietnam conflict.
Right.
Here the Soviet, or I call them the Soviet, Russia 700,000 human lives. And that's not even the Ukrainian. And think of all the billions and billions of dollars of damage that's been done. Trump, my feeling is, from what I have seen, and
stopping youth getting murdered.
He wants to stop this, and stop this, and so it's less of an issue of turning your back on Ukraine and supporting a dictator in Russia, as I see, as he wants to stop the killing and stop this bloodshed.
No, Jim, it's one or the other. It's either you support Ukraine or you support Putin, right? I mean, that to your point, that's how it's really.
And to your point, you know what? It's very easy for Americans sitting here in our luxury and in our freedom that we have and how safe we are. Our cities, we claim, have extended crime and gangs and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and we have fentanyl coming in, and we have our problems, but we don't have the problems that are happening in Israel right now and Gaza, and we don't have the problems that are happening. So it's easy for us, I feel, to jump on an idealistic, stage and to speak from that standpoint. So,
but I mean, again, who are we if we can't speak about it? Who are we to go fund it, right? And again, that's where Trump, from outside the humanitarian aspect of trying to just save bloodshed, right? Save the lives of the Ukrainian and Russian youth. He is saying, all right, well, if Zelensky wants to continue fighting the bully, right? At the expense of the future of his country, like literally he is killing the future of his country by continuing on this war. Like, I don't care what you have to say. Like, yeah, they give up the Donbass and Luhansk region, even give up Crimea. Like, so what if you're killing millions of people, to fight the bully, right? I mean, again, you're always taught in school to fight the bully, or now and this is kind of funny if you look at it as like schoolyard bullying, right? It does kind of play into what like the new age kids are told. Well, you don't fight back. You go tell, an adult, right?
Right.
And the United States is the adult, right? And then you got to get the United States to, come fight the bully. And it's like, why are we getting involved in this? And if we can't talk about it, then we certainly don't want our boots on the ground there, let alone all of our money going over there.
To be clear, my position is differing from yours to a degree, and I'm just making a statement.
Yeah.
I'm being a coward here because I'm not taking a stand. I'm just saying that my perspective, as I sit back and where I am and viewing this, Trump wants to end the suffering and end the war and the bloodshed.
I agree.
That's in his mind. What I've heard him say, and his actions to me speak to this.
Right.
And it may not be that Vladimir Putin has to run back to Russia with his tail between his legs and they lose land back to Ukraine or something, or they forfeit some territory that was originally theirs to Ukraine. It may not wind up being like, a World War II scenario where the bad guys, lost totally. So I feel it's a very complex situation. I think our culture and our media has boiled this thing down, and I don't know if it's quite as black and white as people want to make it. And that's why I'm leaning to support Trump's viewpoint. We need to end this bloodshed. And
absolutely.
Thank God we're not having it over where we live.
Yeah, I mean, I never grew up a draft. You never grew up with a draft, right? You were post-Vietnam, which was the most recent draft we had in this country. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, knock on wood, I think I'm even getting up in age to where, depending on how bad it gets, right? Because I think Ukraine, it'll take any of age male, right? So, I mean, thank goodness, right? We're in the situation we are, to your point.
Yeah.
Very quickly, quite frankly. If Europe and the United States, which is the cumulative of $47 trillion, goes against Russia, who has a GDP of $2 trillion, we should be able to defeat them pretty rapidly by sanctions, by undermining their energy production, and by overwhelming weapon systems. I think we could have ended this very quickly if we would just come with force and done what we're supposed to do. We didn't do that. We collectively, Europe, United States, Ukraine did very well because Zelensky's, what I believe was bravery. Zelensky was able to, with his countrymen, run a first world army which has, from a country that has 5 times the population and 20 times the GDP, was able to stop them in their tracks, destroy half their armor, and had about half a million casualties because these guys were fighting for their home. I support that. And I told President Zelensky, I said, if you really want to continue support, because I understand how that waxes over or wanes over time, right? I said, just make sure that the money goes to the place it needs to go, because Americans won't understand if it goes to a teacher's pension, and they'll understand if it goes to the military
Yeah.
to fight a war. But
I think here, from the numbers perspective, the Ukraine casualty numbers I've heard are 300,000 on the low end to 600,000 on the high end, and maybe even as much as Russia, right? Because again, Ukraine, from a recruitment standpoint, they don't want to publish the real numbers, right?
Right.
Hey, sign up and you're likely to be sent to death, right? By a drone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
so of the approximately $175 billion that was allocated, 75, Zelensky says, I received this, we're using it appropriately. Where's the other 100 billion? Trump also says, where's the other 100 billion? Now, a bunch of this went to USAID and a bunch went to the World Bank, and we're supposed to disseminate in an appropriate manner. That's what we're investigating. Now, I'm not sure, because Zelensky, I think, is an honest broker of what he's trying to accomplish. He wants to save his nation. And I want Ukraine to win, and President Trump said he wants to do it, and I know you're going to.
Have you watched any of the longer form Zelensky conversations, interviews?
No.
I've watched probably like 3 hours of him actually like speaking across 3-4 longer form discussions, and some of it's in Russian, some of it's in Ukrainian, some of it's in English, and again, I think he is very genuine, but I think he's also caught up in almost like the ego of not losing, but again, what is the actual win condition for Ukraine? And that's what, I struggle to come up with, right?
One of the other things, too, that I pick up is that the money is unaccounted for that we have given Ukraine.
Missing $100 billion, more than $100 billion.
So, and that, I don't have a problem with wanting accountability. This is one of the main things I have a problem. One of the main reasons why I support the DOGE effort. I mean,
get to the bottom of where money like this is going, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you uncover in your checking account that you're spending $200 a month on a subscription that you no longer get and you don't want, and yet the money's going out, you're going to stop that.
Right.
That's what we're going to do, and I call it common sense.
Right.
I call it common sense.
Jim, you don't want our tax dollars going to paying Social Security for 150, 170, 200-year-old people?
So they didn't like what he just said.
It's in our best interest, in my opinion. And by the way, this splits the Republican Party down the middle. Half Republicans support.
Vote against them then.
I've repeatedly spoken up.
Where?
I'm speaking about it right now, and I voted for on the floor. And I have voted for Ukraine support every single time.
In that case, right?
Now, if you don't think I'm an independent voter, check my voting record.
Yeah.
I voted for Ukraine every time. I've been over to Ukraine. I've talked to Zelensky. I don't know what else to tell you. I want them to win. I continue to stand. I just made my statement. I stand by it.
We have David Eastis from Roswell.
You're not going to do that, sir.
David Eastis. Excuse me. I butchered that last name. Sorry, sir. Roswell, you have a DOGE question, specific DOGE question for the Congress.
Yeah. As a physician, when you look at the cuts or the elimination of NIH, CDC, all the health things, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security cuts proposed, what's your concern about your constituents, the results of health care and everything else that goes with that, if those things go through? And
You ever been able to hear him?
no.
You put it right up to your mouth like that.
Okay, sorry. Also, if those cuts, as you said on Fox News, I believe, that there's hundreds of billions of dollars to be saved with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security that needs to be cut. And why not take that money from taxing the billionaires and corporations?
And this is the problem when you let people go free flow on a microphone in a format like this, where was even the real question in all of that, right?
We'll start with the last and then work backwards just for the sake of taxation. So I'm a big consumption tax guy. I believe that people who have more spend more, they can't hide their money if you don't have loopholes. I think the taxation system has benefited billionaires because, quite frankly, and you're probably gonna have issue with this, but if you think that billionaires are a partisan issue, there are more billionaires that get more money to the Democrats than Republicans. That's just a fact. And if you really want to dispute that, just check, Google it. Don't take
He said there are more billionaires who are aligned with the Democrats than on the Republican side.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Aligned backing part
Right,
of.
sure.
Right,
That
yeah.
money in the bank, you can't tax it, just sitting in the bank, right? It's when it's used for consumption, or when it's earned. Income tax, right, you're right. So as long as there's loopholes.
Well, you called out income tax.
This is why I say consumption tax first. But we won't get into taxation. That's too controversial. Let's get back to what you're asking. You're talking about the Medicaid, Medicare. His original question was, there's a lot of cuts that are coming down. What are we going to do about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security? Actually, President Trump has been pretty quick to say he doesn't want to touch Social Security. Now, I believe we have to. And let me tell you how. There's a bipartisan solution.
Can you pause it?
Yeah.
It's my understanding Social Security will only be touched where there's fraud, or where there's a problem.
Right.
And a lot of people, I feel, in this country think that this is a lie and that they are going to mess with Social Security. I cannot imagine that Donald Trump is going to cut people's Social Security in this country. I can't imagine.
That's a death sentence to anyone's legacy.
I can't imagine
really.
that he would do that. And there are friends of mine who could sit here and argue very emphatically that is going to happen and is indeed already happening.
And he'll talk about like changes need to be made. It's like there's no way around it. It will default, like the Social Security program will default in, I think it was less than 20 years time, there's just, unless we do something about it, like that's just a fact, it's going to happen, right? And I think, again, not a popular opinion at the surface level, but I think if we were to really implement, like I asked you last week off the podcast, would you not prefer if you got all the money back that you've put into Social Security up until now on your next tax return? And maybe, Jim, you're 57, right?
Yep.
So when do you qualify to start collecting Social Security?
62.
So let's say, you know what, you're within 5 years, you've been grandfathered in, you're still going to be able to collect on your Social Security. But anyone that's 56 and, this birthday and younger, on your next tax return, file that you're collecting your Social Security, maybe submit all of your pay stubs or whatever that Social Security taxes have been taken out of, and you're going to get a full reimbursement for every single cent that you put into Social Security. So the people that are close to retirement that have been banking on it, they're still taken care of. The people that still have further to go, they get all that money that they put into this government retirement plan, but they have their freedom in their hands to maybe even have a much better retirement, using that money in better investments than, having it tied up in Social Security.
I've talked to several of my Democratic colleagues about a bipartisan solution to Social Security. We'll start there, and we'll work down to the other two here in a second. You can actually adjust it, and you have to, by the way. If you don't do something in about 7 years, we'll have an automatic 21%.
7 years, not even 20 years, that will default.
It's already built in. I'm trying to stop that from happening.
Lift the cap.
Can we talk about a bipartisan solution, please? Something that Democrats and Republicans agree on, not a partisan one. Something that I'm willing to compromise on, okay? We have solutions that we agree on. That I have 4 Democrats that said that they were willing to. We're not going to take it away from anybody who has it. We're not going to take it away, change anything for anybody who's about to get it. But maybe if you're 10 years away, you adjust it by 3 months. You're 20 years away, you adjust by 6 months. You're 30 years away, you adjust it by a year. Lifting the cap, when you have $36 trillion in debt, and you're the world currency, you're the standard world currency, And you're
Can you pause it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've said this before. I'll say it again because I think it's relevant. Since the birth of Christ, every day, it's been roughly 2,000 years.
Yep.
It's about 780,000 days since the birth of Christ. You spend $1 million a day since the birth of Christ.
$780 billion, yeah.
And you still haven't reached $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And you mean to tell me that we're $35 or $36 trillion?
In debt, yeah.
Every economist thing, or any economics interview I've seen and anything I've read where economists are asked about this situation, they say, most of them say, quote, I don't know how it's going to end, but it's not going to end well. So we have a serious problem with this.
And again, we got to grow our economy. So like, we're not going to, necessarily outgrow or we're not going to pay off our debt, just by cutting expenses, right? We got to outgrow
We've
our
got to
debt.
be creative.
Yeah, right.
We've got to be creative.
Well, we got to produce more as a country. That's going to increase our GDP, our, per capita GDP. What is each individual in America actually outputting, right, to provide value to others within America and the rest of the world, right? And that needs to increase, right? We've gotten so used to the consumption economy that, over the last 40 years has made life so convenient here in America. But it was because of the decades upon century, a couple centuries here in the United States of a lot of hard work and production to make, all this consumption and convenience possible.
That's right.
$1 billion of debt interest per year.
And another quick aside, another $1 trillion being added every 90 days.
God almighty.
It's not going to fix the eventual economic collapse of the United States. It's just not. It's just not. If you don't do something with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which is 75% of our budget, is mandatory spending.
Military.
75%. Google it right now.
We can.
75% of your budget is mandatory spending. We have a 30% deficit. If you cut all of your military and all of your discretionary spending, you still have a shortfall. We are heading towards a cliff where we will no longer be the economic standard of the world, which we've been since 1972, and you will lose your place in history, you'll lose your buying power, your interest rate will go up, and you'll add $9 trillion.
We're all trying to get through this. Let's be respectful while the Congressman speaks.
Nobody can hear when you're yelling.
Okay.
If you want the explanation, you gotta
Next question is for Christina, from Christina Props.
So we just move on. We don't really.
On schools and child.
Again, there wasn't much of a question, and that's why I kind of label these instead of actually asking the question, just kind of what the questions, touched on. In this case, we're about to hear from Christina Provost from Roswell, talking about childcare, education, and school lunches, which, if you've heard about his recent CNN interview, was taken out of context, of course, where people were trying to characterize him as someone that doesn't want kids, in our district to have a lunch, when in reality, high school kids that have the ability to go out and work should work and shouldn't be getting free lunches if they have ability to go work and have a paycheck so they can pay for their lunches.
Christina, the floor is now yours. Christina has the floor.
And of course, people still aren't going to agree with that take, but it's one thing to not agree with it versus not agreeing with a misconstrued version of that take.
Hi, I'm a dietitian and you're a doctor, so I think you should be very aware that preventative medicine and healthy food is a lot cheaper than things like dialysis and ER visits. So based on your comments about the possible school lunch fees and things like that, just as a mom in this community and with the talk about the education cuts and the school lunch cuts, what are you gonna do? Will you make sure hungry kids get fed and 5-year-olds aren't picking berries? Or are you going to
take care of my kids because I can't do it?
If we're going to be a red state or a blue state, I don't care, but what are we going to do is make sure
That's
our
a good
schools
point.
stay good.
But that's even Social Security. Take care of me in retirement because I can't do it myself.
I wonder if my grandparents, when they were coming up, and your grandparents, if the government was taking care of kids like that, you know, to make sure kids had a lunch.
No, because most kids weren't going to public school because that was a privilege, right? You know, getting an education as a child. I mean, again, that wasn't too long ago in this country, right?
You know who we need to have on this podcast? We need a libertarian viewpoint. I don't sense there were many libertarians at this.
Yeah.
Because a true hardcore libertarian, they don't want.
But even that term has been co-opted.
It has. It has. This world is not. This is not my world. The political world is not my world. And so I'm only able to offer you my perspective of where I sit. I've worked my ass off for 30 plus years, and I sweated the load. I fretted and worried and made sure that I got my job done and didn't get fired.
Yep.
I made a lot of money and invested it wisely. I didn't go spend it on bullshit.
Frivolous,
and I'm in the situation that I'm in right now. And so I don't relate with school kids that I don't have any kids.
Right.
So a lot of people would say, well, Jim, you're not relevant because, you don't represent, most people. And they're right, I guess.
But your tax dollars still go into
I still get taxed.
The school, like the public school system, right?
Yep.
And again, I think we could all agree that like we don't want kids literally going hungry and like they end up on the streets, right? And like they don't end up as like contributing members of our local Alpharetta, Roswell, Forsyth, Fulton County, sort of area, right? But at the end of the day, sorry you didn't grow up in like the same situation where I was in high school. Yes, I was working in high school, but it wasn't like I had to take my money that I was making from working my job at Best Buy to pay for my school lunches.
Right.
Now, if that would have been the case, I would have done it, right? But luckily I was able to waste my money,
Your ancestors did that. I guarantee you your ancestors did that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, again, even just my grandfather, he didn't go past eighth grade, right? So he never even had to worry about having a school lunch provided to him because he had to make ends meet, starting 9th grade, right? He was making a living, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think we should honestly get more back to that sort of education system. That education in this country should be optional after 13 years old. I think you should get all of the reading, writing, and arithmetic skills that you need to be, capable of being a contractor, a plumber, any of like the sort of trade skills. Be literate enough to go in and, submit a vote at the ballot, even if you have to write it in, right? And I think that's what we should be promoting. And if you want to go towards like a post-secondary education, but treating it more like those high school years, you're already working towards a more kind of specialized path instead of, quite frankly, I think wasting a lot of that time not actually having to figure out what you want to do in life and just kicking that can down the road even further.
Going back to what we talked about a second golden age for America, with one of the focuses, it's my understanding, is bringing manufacturing back to this country. And with that, we're going to see, I think, a resurgence of the trades. So less people going to college, more people getting a job, learning a trade. They can use their hands and actually do something and make a good living doing it.
He touches on that, I think, right after this question. And there's a young high school student that was in here asking, I think, a great question that touches on the immigration issue, and how it relates to scholarships, that you are eligible here if you're a citizen of this country, you have residency in Georgia for X amount of years, you qualify for the Hope or Zell Miller scholarship. But if you don't have residency because you're from India or whatever the case may be, and I think in this kid's case, you'll hear he's been here for 17 years, right? He's a 17-year-old kid about to be 18 and is not going to be able to get Hope or Zell Miller, even though he's been an American his entire life, right? And I have heard Trump talk about like almost his case exactly. Like, of course, he doesn't want to send these like bright young kids back to India, where, they may quite frankly, may amount to not much of anything, but we don't want to send those people back that do go start the multinational or international conglomerates that come out of India or Taiwan or China, like has happened many times when we have international students come to America, study, want to start businesses, and can't stay to start that business because typically you have to get like an H-1B and you have to get a company to like sponsor your H-1B, right? So if you want to start a company as a foreigner, like, good luck, right? You need to get off the ground really quickly and prove that this is a valuable company, and try to do that, in, let's say, even 2 years time, if you're trying to do it while in school, right? And so I do think there's obviously some problems that we need to address with immigration, but not just letting in hordes of people, across our border illegally.
So actually, I'm an educator for 4 years. I taught in private and public schools as an associate professor. I take education very seriously. My middle child received IEP, that was called, for the special needs.
You got to know everything.
And then
you can't. I mean, it's so hard doing what he's doing, and he's an elected official. We are putting them up on this pedestal that is almost impossible
to live up to.
Live up to the standards, and the best intentions. There's going to be someone that's going to. It happens on both sides, of course.
And then you hear the lady, "We don't care about like what you do," and it's like, then why are you here, right? Because this is your opportunity to be able to get to know him, and again, hopefully a more legitimate, well-meaning way. But if you're not there to have that sort of well-meaning understanding, why be there at all?
You think he'll have another town hall?
We'll see, because again, he did make the point, and this is what I wanted to call out, where he didn't word it the best, where, hey, I don't have to be here. And it's like, okay, I get what you're trying to get at, and I would be flustered too, but there's a better way of going about it than saying, hey, we don't have to be here. Like, you're right, you don't have to, but good luck trying to win a re-election if that's the way that it's being construed as, which again, I don't think that's literally what he was meaning in that sort of like, screw you guys, I don't have to be here.
I just wonder if enough people see this, if he did another one, I'm wondering if there might be a stronger showing of people who agree with the direction that he's represents, that would show up to show support for him, as well as show other people who are coming in with more of the
that's
lynch
not
mob.
so one-sided.
And that's,
you're not representing us. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's tough.
No, you're absolutely right. There's no appeasing everyone. That's for sure.
So this is my middle child, who's full grown now and doing well in college, who I've encouraged to go to a technical school so he can make a living and not be replaced by AI, and to do some things that really would benefit his life based on his individual talents. I take education very seriously. I think AI can be transformative. I think we're...
School lunches!
Hey, let him get through the question, please. Please. If you would let him finish, maybe he will answer the question.
You asked about educational solutions. I'm sorry? I'm getting that. Okay. If you don't want me to talk about educational options, then I won't talk about it. We'll just talk about school lunches if you like.
It's all about the soundbite. We don't care what you actually think. We just want you to address this soundbite that we heard.
I didn't
that was
see the CNN interview. And did they edit what he said, or they just
of course.
Spin?
Yeah, there was a little clip that was aired on CNN about his answer that he doesn't want kids to have lunches, but then you go watch like the full, and it was only like a 7-minute interview or something like that he did say, hey, I of course don't want any kids to struggle, like going hungry, but any kid that is in high school that is able to work, I think we should be encouraging them to go work and, pay for their lunch if need be, right? If you want to kind of take a quick break really quick, I would like to get at least through a little bit more of this, and we'll come back.
Sure.
Cool. All right, and we're back. So want to skip ahead a little bit because I think we got the gist of what he was getting at with school lunches. Again, don't want to continue beating that already dead horse. There's a couple more that I want to get to. This guy was asking about what can be done about the cost of pharmaceuticals, but here was a student that came up and asked a question.
Ms. Ruth Tyler from Marietta, you have a question for the Congressman on immigration. Ms. Ruth, the floor is yours.
So I'm a high school student. I'm a senior this year looking at colleges. I'm a senior this year. I'm in high school. I've been looking into schools, especially in state, because it's cheaper. However, I don't get open Zell because I'm blocked due to residency status, and I've tried to contact you guys, and not much has been able to be done. So I just want your opinion. Do you feel that it's fair that someone that's lived here for 17 years does not get access to open Zell, even though they meet the academic and SAT requirements?
Very good.
For those of you who are not familiar, we have about 14% of our constituency is Indian diaspora. We have a broken, I think we all agree, regardless of your partisanship, we have a broken.
So he goes on to, and again, don't take my word for it. Anyone that may be watching or listening to this, feel free to go watch this whole recording. We're not going to cover it all over the course of the conversation we're having right here, right now. Do also look up the City of Roswell version and go compare the audios compared to ours, where it's censored. A lot of it could be said to cut out like the really loud, what's called clipping in the audio world, that the audio spikes to
due to booing or clapping. Or...
Right, exactly. But in any case, it was clearly not a real representation of what the town hall was like. And again, our producer, made the comment where in the City of Roswell version, you'll just see Rich McCormick, kind of standing, waiting to speak, like he's like frustrated, like as you're seeing in our version. But what you're not hearing in the City of Roswell is all the boos or, oh yeah, get him, sort of yells and chants and screams. And so again, I do encourage people to go look at what else is out there, but this is the best full view of, the recording or the meeting as it happened.
And you saw the clip with Hillary Clinton. This is years ago. And she's walking up on a podium. I don't remember where exactly it was. And there was some clapping that you heard. And then one of the networks aired what really was, it was boos. And the media company actually erased those boos. Totally misrepresented. I hate that stuff.
Yeah.
It's misrepresenting. It's communication that's being perverted almost.
Absolutely. And again, it's because news has become sensationalized for the clicks, for the views, for the entertainment value, and that drives the advertising dollars that they need to stay afloat. So,
and we know that what Trump has said about the 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris, she's asked a question and it was so convoluted, the answer. 60 Minutes edited that and took something else she said like later and spliced it together, essentially, just edited her response. And I just feel that's so disingenuous. We deserve to hear these representatives in their true form.
And then again, then Trump is misrepresented as attacking the media, like, oh my gosh, he's going after our free media. No, he's trying to correct the media that hasn't been correctly reporting on news, right? They've been very biased, been misconstruing the news for how it actually happened. And I know ABC, there was a big deal shortly after the election that Trump got $15 million donated from the lawsuit that he won against ABC to his presidential library to be. So again, then that's misconstrued. Oh my gosh, Donald Trump is trying to censor ABC, MSNBC, all of the news organizations that don't paint him in a positive light. No, he's trying to correct the media agencies across the board to accurately report information. At least that's my understanding of what's happening.
Immigration system, yes? Okay.
So again, he goes on to really address this question about his specific circumstance, the high school kid's specific circumstance. You do hear some people in the crowd like, well, what are you going to do to help him? And it's like, well, he can't just make case-by-case exceptions to the law, right? We don't want that, you know? Right. And so he's like, I'm trying to go through all the channels to make it so, you know, cases like this don't happen. But again, he's one person. He can't do it, you know, just presto wave magic wand and make it so. Right?
Or like in the old days with the old politician, you call me up if you need anything, wink, wink, I'll take care of it. We don't want that.
Again, I think to some degree you can, but like when it's something like this, that it's like one person, and again, I guess in your point, you know, well, and this would be rules for thee and not for me. Well, why are you making an exception for him but not everyone else? Let's take another just quick little pause, and then we'll come right back to wrap up.
Sounds good. Hey Beef.
I'm still rolling. Just
rolling.
Cool. And we're back, and just going to skip forward again a little bit to probably the last portion of this meeting we'll review here today. And this is one that just stuck out as, again, one thing coming up, wanting to get your voice heard and get, you know, real feedback from your local representation, right? And then I think there's an instance of this lady where, let me put on a show to make you look like a fool.
Right.
Liv from Roswell, Virginia. You have a question for the Congressman? Qualifications?
I did see this. She spends quite a bit of time basically lecturing him, right?
Before
without asking her a
question. Take my question. I do so appreciate it.
And then puts on the fake Southern aristocratic drawl.
Henry Madison, one of Patrick Henry's younger sisters, and a cousin by marriage of James Madison. Do you know who Patrick Henry was and James Madison, sir? I'm so glad to hear that. While arguing the need for the American Revolution, Patrick Henry said, a king is a tyrant. If a wrong step is made now, the republic will be lost forever and tyranny will rise. I believe you know the rest of his speech. Something about, give me liberty. It's clear from all the writings of our founding fathers that our great republic was never meant to be ruled by a dictator nor a king.
Never heard that argument before. Is that original?
The point that he made earlier, you know, it's bipartisan. People felt the same way about Joe Biden's administration being authoritarian, autocratic, you know, oligarchical, you know, and oftentimes not maybe monarchical, you know, like having a monarchy, but having like this cabal of like, well, if Biden's not really, you know, paving,
ruled by committee,
right.
My shock
and not democratic
ruled by Politburo,
right? Ruled by bureaucracy. I mean, really.
When I that our president had given himself unprecedented
I love the dramatic accent in her voice too.
The Southern aristocratic drawl.
Yeah, it's almost like an audition for Gone with the Wind or something. I mean, the wind done gone.
He makes a comment to some older, you know, media reference that I'm probably like Foghorn something or another. Yeah.
You don't know Foghorn Leghorn?
No, I don't. I guess I need to do
you're too young. I say, boy, go ahead.
Yeah. Days named himself king to his followers.
Here's the question.
Nice. Who said that? Was that his?
No,
was that someone from the audience?
Over by us on the other side. Of the room.
So it was a an attendee, not
Correct.
a staff member.
Correct.
Thank you. Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, Congressman, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
So what was that standing ovation? I see some people are not standing. Just curious, from your remembrance, what percentage of the crowd stood up?
I would probably say 70%.
Wow. Okay. So it was 100 people. It was like 150 people there.
Yeah, probably.
Let's
say 100. Yeah. That stood up cheering and again, how many of those, hey, the mob's doing it, so let me do it too, versus like I wholeheartedly believe in what you're saying. Hard to tell there, but yeah.
And that question was a regurgitation of what we see in mass media, mainly for like other channels, the channels that would be considered left, like MSNBC. Right. I've heard that so many times, that kind of fear or concern that this man is megalomaniac and he's serving as a king or a dictator and not as an elected official, although he did win, right?
The popular vote as well, right?
Yeah.
All seven swing states. Candidate of all time potentially.
Yeah.
Right?
A man who did not even run in primaries,
right?
And still won the nomination.
Right.
Has that happened before?
Not that I'm aware of. And that's, the point that I've again, going into this last election, people were talking about that as if it was a negative, but yet just totally leaving out the fact that Kamala Harris did not win through a Democratic primary process.
Right.
Neither did Joe Biden, right? And Joe Biden, when they were doing the primaries, the only reason why you could say, oh yeah, they did, and Joe Biden won, as the incumbent, was the first campaign state, New Hampshire. The Democratic Party made a rule within their own party, which they're of course allowed to do since it's their own party, not a government organization, made it so Robert Kennedy Jr. or any other person that stepped foot in New Hampshire, or sorry, not North New Hampshire, just New Hampshire, that they were campaigning, their votes would go to Joe Biden. He would get their delegates.
Sounds real Democratic to me, huh?
Very Democratic, right? And
that's sarcasm.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I just find it ironic, and I had made like a big long Facebook post, like, convince me, like, where am I not seeing this laid out to where like Donald Trump is a populist candidate. He's trying to fight back against this, tyranny that we have been, tyranny, bureaucracy, however you want to put it, right? Not really a government of the people for the people for far too long. And yes, he did talk about that was happening under his administration, right? He was having to fight against that. And no, that's not some crazy rhetoric that he's trying to go after, people within our own government. People have talked about him going after the enemy within. And it's like, no, we need to go after Russia. We don't need to we don't have to go after our own federal government agencies. We're all on the up and up, but this has been a problem much longer than even before JFK was in office. And I feel like these people that are anti-Trump, a lot of these people that are anti-Trump going after the enemy within, they would be all for a guy like JFK, retroactively looking back in history. Oh yeah, there was internal forces that he was having to, go up against, right? But that's not possible with Donald Trump, right? And Donald Trump is the only person that we need to get out of federal politics. That just seems very unlikely to me,
It's a good point. I love the theater in this. Now they're pumped up. Everybody's happy.
I'm not going to give you my best foghorn leghorn response. But what else? Go ahead and sit down. Thank you.
Notice how he did say that. I was like, maybe not the best. You just sit down, ma'am. He never said that to anyone else. But, hey, you just clown on me. Let me kind of get one back on you.
When you talk about tyranny, when you talk about presidential power, I remember having the same discussion with Republicans when Biden was elected.
He said
basically this last administration, Biden's administration, he heard the same sort of claims about tyranny, from the right, so it's a bipartisan issue, like tyranny.
It makes me think that, the majority of the people at this town hall are Democrat and they're left. And he announced he was going to have this town hall and word spread.
Right.
And it makes me think that, hey, we're going to go show this guy. We're going to go.
Right.
And that's fine. That's America, right?
Yep.
I'm just wondering if he has another one, if there might be another group of people there that agree with this, the bureaucracy and the bureaucratic state and the dangers that it poses from that viewpoint. Unelected officials creating regulations galore and getting in the way of the will of the people, so to speak. This is one of the things that Musk has been talking about with DOGE. He has said when the bureaucracy runs the government essentially, or has massive influence on the government, the true will of the people is not fulfilled. So.
Yeah, and I think he did a good job fielding this in the way that, it is a bipartisan issue. And he did not support Trump, in the primary process. He backed Ron DeSantis. And then in the general election, he did get behind Trump to support him. So, again, he is his own individual person. If you do go look at his voting record, he's not down the line Republican, as many, politicians are. Hey, this is the party I was able to get into. So I owe my every single vote to this party, and again, that happens on both sides of the current political aisle.
I'm going to commend him that he did a good job given what he faced.
Absolutely.
And he, hopefully, if he stays, he'll grow from this, and he's learned a lot, I guarantee you, from this situation. So maybe the next one we'll see some more tact on his part and maybe some preparation.
Just better crowd control, right?
Yep.
Maybe not giving as many openings for, hey, I'm going to speak what I have to say, and then you'll have the opportunity. Like, just even mentioning that, and again, he doesn't really like, hey, I'm going to go around and pass the microphone. But then people are like, oh, yeah, this is, he says something, then we get to all provide feedback versus, hey, let me set the expectation. I know all of you guys are very interested and excited to, be heard at this meeting, but for us to get anywhere, we need to be very kind and respectful to one another. While I'm answering a question, if everyone could keep their volume down so everyone can hear it, we also need to hold the same true for whoever is currently asking a question with the microphone, right?
Yep.
And just almost being like a dictator when it comes to, all right, you guys, I clearly set the ground rules for how this should go for this to be an effective town hall meeting. Right. And if that's broken, all right, we'll just sit here. And he did that a couple of times, but I look at it kind of like soccer refereeing, funnily enough, that if you let a game, just like, one player from one team goes in for like a dirty challenge or whatever, doesn't get called by the referee, then the other team is going to go for a dirty, and it's like,
and pretty soon you're going to have a bloodbath.
Right. But as long as it's called consistently,
right,
players are fine with that. But there's no right or wrong way of like calling too much or calling too little, as long as it's consistent.
One quick takeaway that I have from this whole thing, and at the beginning of this town hall, what I saw was a typical town hall where the politician gets up and he's calm, cool, and collected, and he's talking and loves everybody, and talking about his past, and he was introduced very well and whatnot. That's old school. I am just, this is a prediction, and it kind of ties in with what I was saying earlier about how we have a new breed of politicians coming in, younger, more articulate, etc. I think you're going to see a change and possibly see less of that, and it's going to be right down to business, or less of that typical traditional politician
I think honestly,
I could be wrong.
I think you're right, and I think we're seeing that take off. And again, maybe not in a way that we align with, but like AOC, she's very known. Alexandra or Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah. Now I did try to watch one that she did like a direct stream, to a live audience, getting tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of viewers, right, for a live stream. And she's like doing essentially a podcast, but she's just talking to her phone camera, right? She's essentially ranting like a mad woman, in my opinion, from what I saw of it. But clearly it works very well for her. She's very popular. I don't know as much at a local level. I don't know when their election cycle is, if she's going to win that handily or if it's going to be a close call, if she's going to lose it. But at least nationally, right? Like she's a household name, right? And so I think to your point, these new younger politicians that are adopting those platforms, they're finding huge audiences. It's just whether or not those huge audiences are the ones that align with, you or myself or, obviously we have a lot of overlap. So both of us in some cases, but I think you're spot on. Because again, you open yourself up to this in a way where you're going direct to social media. You might have people like typing furiously in the live chat comments or whatever, but it's not like actually giving them a voice to like speak out against, what you have to say, where it's very easy to say as like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, hey, look at all this viewership I'm getting. People love me, but you're never really giving people this sort of opportunity to be vocal against what you're representing.
The funny thing is, you're sitting here and a lot of you would probably say the January 6th who are yelling just as loud as you.
I don't know how he thought bringing up January 6th was going to be a good idea.
I don't know why he did that either, but hey, I'm not. He's making. I wouldn't want his job. That's a tough job to stand in front of a crowd like that. I've never really had that happen. I have had to stand in front of, in the Navy, stand in front of your troops and tell them something they don't want to hear, and you get, chided or you get, teased or whatever because you're really
sellout and
you're the messenger, but it comes from you. And one thing you're taught as an officer in the U.S. military is you don't go before your troops and say, okay, the captain said, so y'all got to do this.
You own it, right?
You got to own it, and he's owning it. For the most part, from what I've seen,
right.
So it's just a really tough job.
And no, to your point, like maybe I did miss it, but it was like, Trump's doing this, so therefore I'm doing this, in unilateral support, where I don't like a lot of that where I see, and it could just be bad wording. Well, this is Trump's policy, so I'm doing this, Trump's told me to, he's the boss. No, the American people are the boss, right? You should be doing the will of and again, in the context that I used earlier, it's impossible to appease every single American, right? But just in the wording, like you're going to get people up in arms when you're saying something along the lines, I'm doing whatever Trump's saying because he's the boss and you're not like, and again, that may be true, but be careful of like how you're saying it, right? And again, you don't want people like walking on eggshells to the degree that they're not being genuine anymore, but just know if you say something in a way that's not ideal, it will be misconstrued.
Oh, yeah.
So yelling at me is not going to get any answers.
Did you hear that? I heard a woman scream, "You are a racist."
Yes.
I heard a woman just scream that. Now, where did that come from? Why did they say that?
Because he doesn't agree with her.
That's right.
Yeah.
What did he just say that made her call him a fucking racist?
And to me, like that was something that growing up in middle school, like, and again, middle school for me would have been like 2008 to 2010, 2011. And I had always grown up before that, like you're being racist, right? And then all of a sudden, literally in middle school, like the cultural shift happened to where now you can be a racist. And I remember even in middle school bringing that up to kids, like, wait, like, no, you can't be a racist, right? And it's like, hey, you've cut down a log, right? Does that, like a tree that might have fallen, does that make you a lumberjack, you know, right? And it's like, you might have, and again, there's a difference between killing someone and, you know, being a killer and murdering someone being a murderer, right? But like, let's say you're, you know, armed forces, not you in particular, right? But you take someone's life, right? Like you literally killed someone, right? But we don't go around calling, you know, vets, you know, killers, right? You know, there's more nuance to it, right? But, you know, all these labels just remove the nuance from people that, again, are far more complex than any label can be used for.
What it says to me is that they have it in for this guy. And no matter what he says, and no matter how good the ideas are and how creative they are and how they could truly solve a problem, they don't like him, and they don't trust him, they don't like him, and they consider him a racist, probably because of the fact that he's Republican and he's white, and he's a lean-looking, athletic guy, and he fits the stereotype. So, you know, it's a shame. I'm curious of his next one, his next town hall, if he has another one. I would be curious. I would be curious about that.
Hopefully you'll join us for that one. I mean, again, it is our collective district. So, I mean, yeah. Let's just finish up this clip. We'll wrap it up, and we'll meet again for the next episode. But I do want to just finish up through this.
Hey, let's get to I've seen Game of Thrones too. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on because.
So they're all yelling shame, 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 and of course that's was made popular recently from Game of Thrones. There's like a popular scene where like the queen that has been exiled essentially.
Oh, okay.
Shame, 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 shame.
Nice Hollywood tie in there.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then, you know, that was hypothetically speaking me yelling. Some people want to hear him, you know.
Oh, that was you?
Yeah, that was me. So also being very couth.
He's lucky he's not getting something thrown at him or getting spit on.
If you stop yelling, I will answer. Otherwise, we'll move on.
All right, answer.
If you would stop talking for a second, I will answer your question.
All right.
So if you listen to what we've projected, and this goes both parties, though. This is a bipartisan problem. REINS Act.
No, it's not.
The REINS Act, which reins in executive power for both parties, whoever's in party power, and I think it can be tweaked actually to be much better. I don't think executive privilege should be as strong as it is. I think we're out of bounds right now. I think your direct representation, whether you like me or not, I'm the closest thing you have to represent. Your senator's not going to be as representative as me, and the president's not going to be as representative as me when it comes to you, the people in this district. Likewise, I think state government needs to be more powerful than federal government. It used to be that federal.
So again, he ends up getting most of the crowd on his side by the end of it, and then I don't have this clipped up, but this I lied. There's one more that I think you'll appreciate. That again, we won't go through the rest of it in the last 8 minutes, but just want to introduce you to this last question.
I live in the 7th District of Roswell. I'm a citizen, I'm a taxpayer, and as of this moment, I'm a voter. The reason why I say as of this moment, because I'm also a married woman who took my husband's last name.
You go, girl. But really, why is that applause worthy? You got married and took your husband's. How brave and strong of you, lady. Yeah.
Birth certificate does not match my legal name. On January 9th, 2025, you joined as a sponsor of HR 22 SAVE Act. This means that me and 69 million women like me who have taken their spouse's last name will not be eligible to vote. I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why you are trying to take away my right to vote.
And they end up going kind of back and forth, like, because he was like, I don't think that's what the bill means essentially. And she was like, no, you're trying to take away 69, million women's rights away to vote, because it's going to be impossible now to prove that you are who you say you are because you've taken your husband's last name and that doesn't match, maybe the name you have on your ID or whatever. And it's like, that's so disingenuous. And again, not to say that doesn't happen, but let's say that almost already has happened where some poor innocent, newlywed woman has gotten turned away, from voting because just the right person at like the voting booth or whatever, like, nope, this does not match and I need it to match. Right. But again, that's 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, whatever that statistic is.
I'm not aware of this being a serious concern.
And again, I think it's misconstrued what it's being represented as in the news versus what it actually is.
Right.
And again, he's trying to get that across, but then that's not the answer that.
I appreciate you sharing this. Yeah, and it's great that you guys went to the town hall. And so there's a lot there, and I hate seeing the mob mentality, but
you and me both.
It is what it is, and we've seen it on both sides.
Right.
It's so tough, the role the politician has. I don't know why anybody would want to go into it, because you have to be able to, if you can unite a crowd like that,
right, be a change agent.
You really, and that's what we're going to have. Mark my words. I don't know how great of a President Trump will be in his final term. The next great president that will be at the same level of a Lincoln, let's say, will be someone who, in my opinion, who unites this country.
Yeah.
And it unites seriously, because we're pretty much right down the middle divided still. And the only way I see Trump being able to unite is he pulls people over to his side. Maybe if we do go into a second golden era of this country, a lot of people will shift and want to go and vote Republican and agree with him, and that will be his way of pulling people, to unite them. That's the only way I see Trump doing it, because he's got his way, his style, and how he leads.
And again, he has his way in the sense that anyone has their way, and like Eisenhower, right?
Yep.
We talked about
Kennedy, JFK.
In a company sense, right? Like JFK, I feel like was more like a Steve Jobs type of leader, where he wanted to be involved a little bit in everything that was going on. Where Eisenhower, he wanted to delegate, each of those roles out, right? And I don't think there's a right or wrong approach, for leadership and, the sense of a president. But they do need to be hands-on, at least to some degree what's going on. And first and foremost, accountable for, what is happening in their administration, whether or not they're, actively telling them to do it or they've just delegated it away, right? And I think Trump did a great job, again, going into the second term, owning those missteps in his first term in office, where he said he didn't have the right people, that he made some misjudgments, and he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to govern. And
you would agree that he's a change agent?
I would agree.
So
and again,
I view JFK as a change agent, and I view Eisenhower as not a change agent.
No.
He was a guy that was status quo. He came in, and there's a belief that military generals don't make great presidents. Ulysses S. Grant.
I've heard he's underrated. I'm not as familiar.
I've heard Michael Beschloss, or actually the guy who just wrote the Washington book that I like so much. Chernow.
Okay,
Ron Chernow has, I saw an interview with him recently, and he talked about how there is a general belief that Ulysses S. Grant was a pretty sorry president, and he totally disagrees with that.
Yeah.
That Ulysses S. Grant, he found
one of our better
is one of the better presidents. So anyway, thanks for sharing this and letting me be a part. Politics is really not I'm not really that political. I'm not very astute with politics. I do have an opinion.
Right.
And we all have an opinion. You guys brought that up earlier. We're Americans. We all have a voice. We all have an opinion, like everyone has one, right? So we should not be afraid to state our opinion. And core beliefs is kind of where I reside with my political views. And the candidate that best, in my opinion, aligns with my core beliefs. And I think a lot of American people, this is me going out on a limb, a lot of American people do the same thing. They may not tell you that, and they may state that, oh, I like this candidate or that candidate because of these specific things. Ultimately, I feel it comes down to core beliefs and how they align with those. My opinion.
Yeah, I mean, again, everyone has different ways of defining, what their core beliefs are. And again, you hear a lot of people talk about like their principles first. And, again, all of that sounds nice in theory, but what does that actually mean in practice? And, Theodore Roosevelt, was a big man of action. And at the end of the day, you can have all these fancy ways about talking about what, is the most meaningful, but unless you're actually doing anything about it. And again, conversations like this, especially publishing, that's a form of doing something about it. But going back to what you were saying, where a lot of people aren't willing to say, hey, look, I'm just willing to offer my perspective. I don't have all the answers. That's a valid perspective that, not a lot of people are willing to put out there. So I think you sell yourself short, in that aspect of not being super political. But I know we've had plenty of political conversations off air where you are like, again, you're willing to admit that you may be wrong in the statement that you're making.
Yeah.
But at least you're trying to get to a truth, right? Again, because it's hard to say the truth, right? And it be very objective, definitive. But I think you come at political conversations in a very genuine way where a lot of people aren't willing to. So
I appreciate that. I was challenged very sternly today by a good friend who took my core belief and alignment of candidates that align, quote unquote, with my core beliefs are the candidates that I tend to lean and go with. And I was challenged very strongly that core belief can be translated into confirmation bias.
Absolutely.
And that the guy that said that, I hope we have on this podcast, because I think he would be a really great person to interview and hear more what he had to say. Very poignant.
Yeah, and to anyone that still may be watching or listening at this point in the conversation, if there are, based off of what you've heard from Jim and I so far, other people, whether hopefully around the metro Atlanta area and, that are more accessible to us, or, reach out, leave comments that, hey, we would love to see conversations with so-and-so. And if they're within our network or the ability to bring into our network, we'd be more than happy to bring in other perspectives. But at the end of the day, the best that Jim and I can do as individuals is give our own perspectives, share experiences that we've had like this. And at the end of the day, again, anyone that's listening and watching, hopefully you're taking in as much information you can, making up your own mind and not just jumping to red team or blue team or any team for that matter.
God bless America.
Yeah. God bless America. God bless Donald Trump, and God bless you, Jim, and
you as well. Thank you, and Brian.
Yeah, our
Till next
lovely
time.
producer. Till next time.
All right.
Great.